Edmund Kemper's early life was marked by instability, neglect, and emotional turmoil, creating the foundation for the violent tendencies that would later define his life. Born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California, he was the middle child of Clarnell Strandberg and Edmund Emil Kemper VI. From a young age, Kemper experienced a troubled family dynamic. His parents' marriage was fraught with tension, primarily due to his mother's domineering personality and her frequent criticism of his father. This toxic environment eventually led to their divorce when Kemper was 9 years old, an event that profoundly affected him. After the divorce, Kemper remained in the custody of his mother, Clarnell, a decision that would have lasting consequences. Clarnell was emotionally abusive, frequently belittling and humiliating her son. She would mock him for his size. Kemper grew rapidly, reaching an imposing stature even in his early teens, and criticized him for what she perceived as his inadequacies. She also instilled in him a deep-seated mistrust and resentment toward women, constantly telling him that he was incapable of forming meaningful relationships and that no woman would ever want him. This relentless verbal abuse eroded his self-esteem and planted the seeds of hatred that would later manifest in his crimes. Clarnell's control over Kemper extended beyond emotional abuse. She was authoritarian and harsh, often isolating him from his siblings and peers. She forced him to sleep in the dark, damp basement, claiming he was a danger to his sisters. This isolation fueled his feelings of rejection and alienation, pushing him further into his own world. Kemper later described these formative years as the beginning of his fantasies about violence, as he began to harbor a deep resentment toward his mother and the women she symbolized in his mind. By the time he was a preteen, Kemper exhibited troubling behavior. He showed a fascination with death and violence, engaging in cruel acts toward animals. He once buried the family cat alive and later killed another cat with a knife, keeping its remains as trophies. These early signs of psychopathy were ignored or misunderstood by those around him, as his mother's domineering presence overshadowed any attempts to address his behavior. In addition to his violent tendencies, Kemper demonstrated an active imagination that took a dark turn. He would play games where he pretended to execute people or fantasize about elaborate scenarios of power and control. At 15, after years of enduring his mother's abuse, Kemper's anger boiled over. In 1964, he was sent to live with his paternal grandparents on their remote farm in North Fork, California. His parents believed the move would help stabilize him, but the isolation and strict environment only exacerbated his feelings of resentment. Kemper disliked his grandmother in particular, viewing her as another authoritarian figure who mirrored his mother's controlling nature. One day, in a fit of rage, he shot his grandmother with a rifle, later claiming he wanted to see what it felt like to kill her. When his grandfather returned home, Kemper killed him as well, reasoning that he did not want him to discover what he had done. These murders marked the beginning of Kemper's violent path, and his calm demeanor after the killings shocked authorities. He showed no remorse, instead offering chillingly logical explanations for his actions. The killings of his grandparents led to his institutionalization, but they also revealed the dangerous combination of intelligence, suppressed rage, and a desire for control that would define his later crimes. These early experiences, shaped by an abusive home life and unchecked psychological issues, laid the groundwork for the monstrous figure Kemper would become. Edmund Kemper's time in institutional care, following the murders of his grandparents, was a pivotal period in his life, revealing both the depths of his psychological issues and his remarkable ability to manipulate others. At the age of 15, after fatally shooting his grandmother and grandfather in what he later described as an act of rebellion and frustration, Kemper was sent to the California Youth Authority for psychiatric evaluation. He was eventually transferred to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility for the criminally insane. It was here that Kemper began to refine the traits that would later make him one of the most chilling serial killers in history. Psychological evaluations at Atascadero revealed that Kemper was far from an ordinary juvenile offender. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, though this diagnosis would later be contested. His evaluators noted his towering intellect, with an IQ of 145, which set him apart from many other patients. Kemper's intelligence allowed him to quickly adapt to his environment and learn the intricacies of psychological manipulation. He studied his own psychiatric reports, memorized the language and behaviors that would present him as rehabilitated, and even befriended the hospital staff to gain their trust. This charm and intellect became his most dangerous weapons, allowing him to hide the darker aspects of his personality. During his time at Atascadero, Kemper also gained access to the facility's psychological testing and treatment programs. He not only participated in these programs, but excelled at them, often assisting in administering psychological tests to other inmates. This gave him unique insight into how mental health professionals viewed criminal behavior and what markers they looked for in evaluating progress. Kemper used this knowledge to craft an image of himself as a remorseful, reformed young man. His cooperation and seemingly genuine efforts to improve led many staff members to view him as a success story. Despite his apparent progress, Kemper's time at Atascadero did little to address the root causes of his violent tendencies. While he was able to mask his deep-seated rage and resentment, these feelings continued to fester beneath the surface. His relationship with his mother, Clarnell, remained a central point of contention in his psyche. He frequently spoke about her during therapy sessions, describing her emotional abuse and the intense anger he felt toward her. However, rather than processing these emotions in a healthy way, Kemper internalized them, building a reservoir of hatred that would later fuel his crimes. In 1969, after serving just 5 years, Kemper was released from Atascadero at the age of 21. His release was largely due to his ability to convince the staff that he was no longer a threat. Against the recommendations of some evaluators, he was placed back into the care of his mother, a decision that would prove catastrophic. The same toxic dynamic that had contributed to his earlier violence was now reignited, setting the stage for his future crimes. Kemper's time in the institution highlights a critical failure of the system. While he was able to manipulate his way to freedom, the underlying issues that drove his violent behavior went unaddressed. His release marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which he would channel his intelligence, charm, and pent-up rage into a series of murders that would shock the world. Between May 1972 and February 1973, Edmund Kemper embarked on a killing spree that would earn him the nickname the Co-Ed Killer. Over the course of 9 months, he murdered 6 young women, all of whom were hitchhikers in the Santa Cruz area. These crimes, marked by meticulous planning and disturbing violence, revealed a deeply warped individual who outwardly appeared calm, intelligent, and non-threatening. Kemper's ability to blend into society while committing such heinous acts made him all the more dangerous. Kemper's victims were chosen at random, typically young college students whom he picked up while they were hitchhiking. His approach was calculated and disarming. Standing at 6'9" and weighing over 250 pounds, Kemper was an imposing figure, but he used his intelligence and soft-spoken demeanor to put his victims at ease. He often posed as a friendly, helpful man who offered them a ride. Once they entered his car, however, his victims were unknowingly entering a carefully planned trap. Kemper had modified his vehicle to ensure there was no escape. The passenger side door could not be opened from the inside, giving him complete control once the ride began. After gaining their trust, Kemper would drive his victims to remote areas where he would carry out his horrific acts. His preferred method of murder was strangulation, though he sometimes used a firearm. After killing his victims, Kemper would engage in acts of mutilation and sexual violence, often keeping their dismembered body parts as trophies. The gruesome details of these acts revealed the depths of his depravity and his desire for control over his victims, even after death. What made Kemper particularly chilling was the duality of his existence. During the day, he worked for the California Department of Transportation and often socialized with law enforcement officers at a local bar called the Jury Room. The police officers, unaware of his crimes, found him personable and friendly. Kemper even expressed interest in their work, asking questions about the ongoing investigations into the murders he was committing. This connection allowed him to stay one step ahead of the authorities and avoid detection. His intelligence and ability to manipulate those around him made him a master of deception. The community of Santa Cruz was gripped by fear as the bodies of his victims began to surface. The discovery of dismembered remains sent shockwaves through the area, and local law enforcement struggled to connect the murders. Kemper's ability to evade capture was due in part to the randomness of his crimes, as he did not target individuals he knew, making it difficult for investigators to establish a pattern. Despite his outward composure, Kemper's crimes were driven by deep-seated psychological turmoil. Each murder was a rehearsal for the ultimate act he longed to commit, the murder of his mother. For Kemper, the young women he killed were surrogates for his mother, objects onto whom he projected his hatred and rage. This twisted motivation added a layer of psychological complexity to his crimes, making them all the more terrifying. By early 1973, Kemper had killed 6 women, leaving the community in a state of panic and confusion. Little did anyone suspect that the friendly Big Ed, who frequented the jury room and chatted casually with officers, was the very man responsible for the brutal murders haunting Santa Cruz. In April 1973, Edmund Kemper's killing spree reached its horrific climax with the murders of his mother, Clarnell Strandberg, and her close friend, Sarah Hallett. These final acts of violence were the culmination of years of pent-up rage and psychological torment. For Kemper, his relationship with his mother was the root of his anger, humiliation, and ultimately, his transformation into a killer. Clarnell's domineering personality, relentless criticism, and emotional abuse had left deep scars on Kemper's psyche, shaping his hatred of women and fueling his desire for revenge. Her death was, in many ways, the inevitable conclusion of his warped internal narrative. On the evening of April 20th, Kemper bludgeoned his mother to death with a claw hammer while she slept in her bed. Afterward, he decapitated her and committed acts of desecration that underscored the deep-seated hatred he harbored. He later described this act as a symbolic gesture, silencing the voice that had tormented him for years. Kemper reportedly used her severed head for macabre conversations, mocking her even in death. He also removed her vocal cords, attempting to destroy the physical source of the verbal abuse he had endured throughout his life. The sheer brutality and symbolic nature of the crime highlighted the depth of his psychological wounds. After killing his mother, Kemper invited her friend, Sarah Hallett, to the house under the pretense of a casual visit. When she arrived, Kemper strangled her to death. This secondary murder seemed less about personal rage and more about creating a cover story to explain his mother's sudden absence. By killing Hallett, Kemper was likely attempting to stage the scene as if the 2 women had left together, temporarily delaying suspicion. However, after committing these murders, Kemper experienced an emotional shift. He described feeling a profound sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction, as though killing his mother, the person he blamed for all his inner turmoil, had not brought him the relief he expected. Instead of continuing his spree, he decided to bring it to an end. In a surprising move, Kemper fled to Colorado, driving aimlessly for days while listening to news reports of the murders and awaiting his inevitable capture. Finally, on April 23rd, he stopped at a phone booth in Pueblo, Colorado, and called the Santa Cruz police to confess to his crimes. The police, initially skeptical of his confession, were stunned when Kemper provided detailed information only the killer could know. He waited patiently for officers to arrive and arrest him, showing no resistance. His surrender marked a stark contrast to the brutality of his crimes, reinforcing the dichotomy of his personality, a calculating, sadistic murderer who could also appear calm, cooperative, and remorseful. Kemper's decision to turn himself in stemmed from his recognition that he could no longer control his violent impulses. He later admitted that his surrender was not an act of redemption, but a desperate attempt to prevent himself from killing again. With his arrest, one of the most terrifying chapters in American criminal history came to an end, leaving behind a trail of devastation and unanswered questions about the true nature of evil. The case of Edmund Kemper remains one of the most chilling and perplexing in criminal history, not only for the brutality of his crimes, but also for the psychological depths they reveal. Nicknamed the Co-Ed Killer for his spree of murders targeting young female hitchhikers, Kemper's actions continue to fascinate and horrify criminologists, psychologists, and the public alike. His legacy is not just one of violence, but also of profound questions about human behavior, the role of upbringing, and the nature of evil. After his arrest in April 1973, Kemper was remarkably cooperative with authorities, confessing to his crimes in chilling detail. His confessions revealed a man deeply aware of his actions and their implications, yet seemingly detached from the emotional consequences. Kemper himself has often reflected on his motives and actions, describing his murders as a way to silence the anger and humiliation instilled in him by his mother, Clarnell. The matricide, in particular, stands as the centerpiece of his rage, with Kemper going as far as to claim it was her abuse and ridicule that shaped his homicidal tendencies. His killing of Clarnell was not only an act of revenge, but a symbolic release of years of pent-up resentment, though the satisfaction was fleeting. Kemper's trial, which resulted in 8 life sentences, served as a grim reminder of the complexities of criminal behavior. Despite his horrifying crimes, Kemper was known for his intelligence, scoring an IQ of 145, which he often used to manipulate and outwit those around him. This intelligence, paired with his calm demeanor and willingness to assist law enforcement after his surrender, painted a paradoxical image of a man capable of both calculated violence and chilling rationality. Kemper's interviews, conducted while incarcerated, have provided rare insights into the mind of a serial killer, making him a subject of fascination for those studying criminal psychology. His detailed accounts of his crimes and his ability to articulate his motives have contributed to a deeper understanding of the psyche of violent offenders. The societal impact of Kemper's actions extended beyond the crimes themselves. His case highlighted the vulnerabilities in the criminal justice system, particularly how his early murders of his grandparents, which led to his institutionalization, failed to prevent his later spree. The release of someone with such a violent history raised questions about the effectiveness of psychological evaluations and rehabilitation programs. Moreover, Kemper's targeting of hitchhikers brought national attention to the dangers of the practice, leading to widespread caution and changing cultural attitudes about personal safety in the 1970s. Today, Kemper remains incarcerated, and though he has been eligible for parole multiple times, he has shown no desire to re-enter society. In interviews, he has expressed remorse for his actions, though many view this as another layer of manipulation. His legacy endures as a chilling case study in the interplay between nature and nurture, a question that continues to fuel debate. Was Kemper born a killer, or was he shaped into one by his environment? Regardless of the answer, the terror he wrought and the lives he destroyed leave an indelible mark on the annals of crime.